The night Daniel Hayes offered shelter to a stranger in the middle of a brutal winter storm, he thought he was just helping someone survive the cold, but he had no idea that by morning, his quiet act of kindness would put him face to face with a truth that could change his life forever. Snow fell over the city like a heavy curtain, swallowing sound and light until the world felt smaller, quieter, almost unreal. And in the middle of it all, Daniel gripped the steering wheel of his aging sedan, squinting through the windshield as the wipers struggled against the thickening frost. "Dad, is it getting worse?" Lily's small voice came from the back seat, wrapped in a pink coat that was slightly too big, her boots dusted with snow from the school pickup. "Just a little," Daniel said, keeping his tone steady even as his chest tightened. "We'll be home soon." He had said that 10 minutes ago, and now the roads were nearly empty, the streetlights glowing faintly through the storm like distant stars, the kind of night where everything felt uncertain. Daniel had learned to live with uncertainty over the years, ever since the hospital room, ever since the silence that followed, ever since it had become just him and Lily against the world, building a routine out of necessity. Early mornings, packed lunches, long shifts, and quiet dinners. But nights like this reminded him how fragile that routine really was. The car jolted suddenly, a sharp shudder running through the engine, and Daniel's hands tightened instinctively as the vehicle lost power. No, come on," he muttered, turning the key again, but the engine only coughed weakly before going still. The heater died with it, and within seconds, the cold began creeping in. "Dad," Lily's voice trembled now. Daniel turned in his seat, forcing a reassuring smile. "Hey, it's okay. We're close. We'll just walk the rest of the way." He stepped out into the storm, the wind hitting him like a wall, sharp and unforgiving, and hurried around to Lily's door, lifting her into his arms and wrapping his coat around both of them as best as he could. "Hold on tight," he said, and she nodded, her small arms circling his neck as he stepped away from the car and into the swirling white. The world beyond them disappeared almost instantly, reduced to shifting shadows and biting air, each step heavier than the last as snow gathered beneath his boots. But Daniel kept moving, counting blocks in his head, focusing on the rhythm. Step, breathe, step, because stopping wasn't an option. Lily pressed her face into his shoulder. "I'm cold," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer," he said, though he wasn't sure how long that would be anymore. Then, through the storm, he saw it. A dark shape ahead, hazard lights blinking faintly like a signal in the void. As he got closer, the shape resolved into a luxury SUV, sleek and expensive, completely out of place on that empty street. Its driver's door open, and beside it stood a woman, her long coat whipping in the wind, her hair dusted with snow, one hand gripping a phone that clearly wasn't working. She turned as Daniel approached, her expression caught somewhere between fear and relief, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Two strangers thrown together by circumstance. "Are you okay?" Daniel called out over the wind. "My car, it just stopped," she said, her voice shaking. "I tried calling for help, but there's no signal, and I don't know what to do." Daniel glanced at the SUV, then back at her, quickly assessing what little he could see. She wasn't dressed for this, not even close, her shoes already soaked, her hands trembling from the cold. He shifted Lily slightly in his arms. "You can't stay out here," he said firmly. "It's too dangerous." The woman hesitated, her eyes flicking between him, the child in his arms, and the empty street around them, as if weighing every possible risk. "I don't even know you," she said, almost to herself. "I know," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the urgency pressing in around them. "But I've got a warm place a few blocks from here. It's not much, but it's better than this. You're going to freeze if you stay." The wind howled between them, filling the silence that followed, and Daniel could see the moment her fear shifted, not gone, but outweighed by necessity. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Okay, I'll come." "Stay close," Daniel said, turning back the way he had come, adjusting his grip on Lily as the three of them began moving together through the storm. The woman struggled to keep up, her steps uneven in the deepening snow, but she didn't complain, didn't slow them down more than she had to, and after a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice softer now. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he answered. "This is Lily." She paused briefly, as if considering something. Claire. Daniel nodded, though he didn't look back, focusing instead on the faint outline of buildings ahead, the promise of shelter pulling them forward. By the time they reached his apartment building, Daniel's legs burned and his fingers had gone numb, but he forced himself up the stairs, fumbling with the keys until the door finally opened, and the three of them stumbled inside. The warmth wasn't immediate, but it was enough, the absence of wind alone feeling like a miracle as Daniel set Lily down and quickly shut the door behind them. Go get changed, kiddo, he said gently, brushing snow from her hair, and she nodded, disappearing down the short hallway. Daniel turned back to the woman, Claire, who stood awkwardly near the entrance, water pooling beneath her shoes, her composure cracking now that she was safe. You can take those off, he said, gesturing toward the floor. I'll get you something dry. She nodded, her movements slower now, exhaustion settling in as she slipped off her soaked shoes. Daniel grabbed an old sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants from his room and handed them to her. Bathrooms down the hall. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice carrying something deeper than simple gratitude, something almost disbelieving. While she changed, Daniel moved through the small apartment with practiced efficiency, turning up the heat, setting water on the stove, pulling out blankets, each action automatic, grounded in years of taking care of someone else. When Claire returned, wrapped in clothes far too big for her, Lily was already curled up on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders. Daniel handed Claire a steaming mug. It's just tea, he said, but it'll help. She took it with both hands, as if afraid to let go, and sat down slowly, the warmth finally reaching her. For a while, none of them spoke, the storm raging outside while inside. Something quieter took hold, a fragile, unexpected sense of safety shared between strangers. Daniel didn't ask questions, didn't pry, and Claire didn't offer more than a few simple answers, keeping her story vague, her presence temporary, as if she didn't quite belong there. And maybe she didn't. But for that one night, in that small apartment, none of that seemed to matter. The morning Daniel Hayes walked into the towering glass headquarters of the company he'd worked for nearly a decade, he expected trouble. But the moment he stepped into the executive floor and saw the woman waiting for him, he realized something far more unexpected was unfolding. It had been a few days since the storm, and life had settled back into its usual routine. Early mornings, long shifts, and evenings spent helping Lily with homework. But that night lingered in his mind more than he cared to admit. He hadn't expected to ever see the woman again. So when his supervisor handed him a formal message requesting his presence at headquarters, Daniel assumed the worst. Maybe a complaint. Maybe a mistake he didn't know he'd made. The building itself felt intimidating, all polished floors and quiet efficiency, a place where people like him didn't belong for long. He was escorted upstairs without explanation, led down a silent hallway, and finally shown into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And that's when he saw her. She stood by the glass, composed and confident, nothing like the shaken stranger he had pulled from the storm. When she turned to face him, there was no uncertainty in her expression this time, only calm authority. "Daniel," she said, as if they had met under entirely different circumstances. He stared at her for a moment, trying to reconcile the two versions of the same person. "What is this?" he asked. "Who are you?" She gestured for him to sit, and after a brief hesitation, he did. "My name isn't Claire," she said. "It's Victoria Hale." The name hit him immediately. He'd heard it before, on job sites, in passing conversations. She was the owner, the CEO. Daniel leaned back slightly, disbelief creeping in. "You run the company," he said. "Yes," she replied simply. A quiet tension settled between them. "You didn't know that the night we met," she continued. "No," Daniel said. "I didn't. That's why this matters," she said. He frowned slightly. "Matters how?" Victoria folded her hands on the table, studying him carefully. "After that night, I started asking questions. About you." Daniel's expression hardened just a little. "You had me looked into?" "I did," she said, not apologizing, just stating it as fact. "Your work record, your history. I wanted to understand who you were." Daniel exhaled slowly, unsure how to feel about that. And I found exactly what I expected," she said. "Someone reliable, consistent, someone who shows up, does the work, and never asks for recognition." He looked away slightly. "That's just the job." "No," she said. That's character. Her tone shifted, becoming more direct. We're starting a new initiative, improving how this company operates at the ground level. Emergency response, worker support, community coordination. And I need someone who understands what actually happens outside these offices. Daniel looked back at her, cautious now. And you think that's me? I know it is, she said. I want you to take on a new role. A coordinator position. You'd work between management and field teams, making sure decisions actually make sense where they matter. He blinked, caught off guard. I'm not qualified for something like that. You are, she said firmly. Just not on paper. He let out a quiet breath, still trying to process it. Why me? Victoria held his gaze. Because you helped a stranger in a storm without knowing who she was. Because you didn't expect anything in return. And because people like you are exactly what this company needs more of. The room went still. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back up at her. This isn't charity? He asked. No, she said. It's an opportunity. The night Daniel Hayes realized just how much that single moment in the storm had changed his life didn't come with another crisis, but with something far quieter and far more powerful. Months after that meeting, the new role had settled into something real, something demanding but meaningful, and for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't just getting by. He was building something. The long hours were still there, but they were different now, spent in meetings and field visits, listening to workers, translating their concerns into decisions that actually mattered, and slowly, he began to see the results. Systems improved. Response times shortened. People were heard. And at home, things had changed too. Lily had her own room now, warm and bright, filled with small things Daniel had once had to put off, and the constant weight of uncertainty that used to follow him had begun to lift. Then one evening, as winter crept back into the city, another storm rolled in, not as sudden or violent as the first, but strong enough to test everything they had put in place. Daniel stood in the operations center, watching as teams moved quickly, efficiently, problems addressed before they could grow, and for the first time, he wasn't out there in the cold trying to fix things alone. He was part of something larger, something that worked. His phone buzzed with a message confirming that schools were safely holding students until parents arrived, that roads were being cleared in sequence, that no one had been left stranded. And in that moment, Daniel understood the difference. That night months ago, survival had depended on chance, on one person choosing to help another. But now, because of what had been built, people didn't have to rely on luck alone. Later, after the storm had passed, Daniel picked Lily up and drove home through clear, salted roads, the city steady around them. As they pulled into their apartment complex, she looked up at him and said, "Dad, you helped fix everything, didn't you?" He smiled slightly, shaking his head. "Not everything," he said. "Just a small part." But as he tucked her into bed and stood for a moment in the quiet of their home, Daniel knew the truth was bigger than that. One small decision, to stop, to help, to open a door, had set everything in motion. And somewhere across the city, in a world that once felt far removed from his own, Victoria Hale knew it too. Because in the end, what had seemed like a simple act of kindness hadn't just changed one night. It had changed the course of many lives, including his own.